Hello and welcome to the channel Question Everything. So, today we're going to be looking at some architecture around the world and world's fairs and how those two kind of link up in a very strange way. We're also going to be looking at sort of the narratives behind world's fairs and world architecture that doesn't seem to line up with common sense or just, any sort of digging into these things. And we're going to start with the 1893 World's Fair. So, the 1893 World's Fair was held for the 400th anniversary of Columbus discovering America, 1492 to 1892. They were late with the construction, a year, so 1893. Apparently, the fair was built in 2 years, and that would mean they thought they could build it in 1 year since it took 2 years. They thought they would finish in 1892. Um, And the mainstream narrative says that it was constructed of a mixture of plaster, stucco, and simple building materials. That narrative soon comes into question when you look at photos of these buildings. So we're going to take a look at a couple of these. Suppose that's a bad one. Alright, so this kind of architecture, Greco-Roman style architecture. And these buildings are really incredible and huge, monolithic even. I'm going to find an image to put up on the screen while I read an excerpt from a book called Magic of the White City that was written about the World's Fair. This World's Fair, 1893 Chicago, it was called the White City. Here we are. So I want you to look at this image and just sort of take it in. You've got your Victorian era people walking around and this magnificence around them. Lion statues up top, massive domes, giant gold statue, arches. This looks like the Arc de Triomphe sized thing here. That's just the entrance to this building. I believe this is the Manufacturers and Liberal Arts building, but we'll get to that later. So, this excerpt. The sun shone down on a gleaming city, filled with structures of almost impossible size and grandeur, a new Rome or Venice, an elegant city of canals and classical columns. But we're led to believe this is what you see here, was built in 2 years on reclaimed swampland 7 miles from Chicago. Okay? Another excerpt here. The fair's administration building resembled a replica of the Capitol building. It was at the west end of a group of buildings named the Court of Honor. This one here. The Court of Honor buildings were massive, Greco-Roman themed behemoths that dwarf many modern buildings in comparison. In the center was a large basin of water with a massive statue of a boat adorned with classical allegories. It's all the way down here. We'll take a look at that later. At the other end of the basin was a 65-foot tall statue of a woman with a laurel wreath, a robe, and holding an orb with a bird atop in one hand, and a staff with a Tartarian cap, which was meant to represent freedom, And the statue appears to be either plated or solid gold. I'm not sure. Behind the administration building, there is a train station with dozens of railway lines leading from all across America. The mayor of Chicago, Carter Harrison, and President Grover Cleveland made an appearance at the fair. Two fountains on either side of the basin reportedly shot brightly colored streams of water 150 feet into the air. How was this possible in 1863? This was apparently the largest World's Fair ever held and supposedly cost $22 million in 1893. How was this cost allotted when the city was still recovering from the Great Chicago Fire of 1871? A fire that only killed about 300 of a population of 300,000, yet somehow devastated all of the city's buildings. Well, not all, but a great deal. Another alarming statistic is that 100,000 people were left homeless after this fire, and we're to believe 20 years after this, with 100,000 homeless, they can spend 22 million on temporary structures at the fair. The logistics of the fair do not make sense at a base level, and the mainstream narrative immediately crumbles. I'm going to read another excerpt about the Manufacturers and Liberal Arts Building. That is this one right here. I'm going to try to get a bigger picture of it up on screen here for you. Here we go. Well, that one wasn't really very good quality, I suppose. But let's just keep looking through these. You really can't see enough once you start looking at these. There it is. The Manufacturers and Liberal Arts Building. This, um, there's not, it kind of leaves you speechless. It just left me speechless right now, and I'm making the video. But let's continue. The Manufacturers and Liberal Arts Building in the Court of Honor was the largest building in the world, and, if still standing, would be the second largest building in the world. Mind you, this building was made with poor materials like stucco and plaster, and was not meant to last. And the second largest building today, it would be second only to an aircraft manufacturing hangar. So we don't build anything of this grandeur and size anymore. And we're not quite sure why. I guess we just don't have the money. Yeah. So, this structure was filled end to end with mechanical and technological inventions, many of which had never been seen in public by man. Many notable people were said to have been inspired by the fair, such as Henry Ford, Walt Disney's father, Frank Lloyd Wright, and even L. Frank Baum was said to have been basing his Emerald City after the White City. So now I'm going to take you to one of the buildings, the Palace of Fine Arts. This building right here. Here's a picture of it originally at the World's Fair. This building is still standing. Here it is in Chicago. So, did they pre plan this? Did they decide to actually build one of these out of stone and keep it as a sort of marker? Or were all of these buildings permanent. So now I'm going to get away from the World's Fair a little and go over to the world because this style of architecture, I've been asking you to take notes of it throughout the video. The style of architecture can be found all over the world. And the mainstream narrative is most of this was built in the mid 1800s in an architectural style called historism. So let's look at some of these. This is Japan. Is this the kind of architecture you expected to see in Japan in the 1800s? No. In fact, if you did not know these buildings existed because you lived in Japan or had visited, you might not know they exist at all because I didn't. I had no idea before I started digging and really looking into the history and narrative of these sorts of buildings. Steps leading up into the second floor, windows below ground for some reason. You'll notice that a lot in this architecture. Cool statue. Japan. This looks like a French manor, a Parisian building, but it's in Japan. Kobe, Japan. Tokyo. Yokohama. So, Yokohama again. Taiwan. Not the sort of architecture you expect from Taiwan. Argentina. This looks like Washington, D.C. or Italy. Buildings with that Romanesque style. But this is in Argentina. Again, this one sort of looks like the Philadelphia City Hall, which is kind of strange. You've got an uneven ground level and windows looking out at ground level for some reason. Cuba. And if these buildings hadn't been labeled by country, and if you hadn't seen the Cuban flag here, you honestly would have a hard time guessing what city this is in, what country this is in. Because this same style is found worldwide. Paraguay. This is a picture of the 1893 World's Fair. And while we're at it, let's just take a look here. It looks sort of old and weathered, perfectly smooth, looks like real stone. Stairs look a bit weathered here. And even the columns don't look new. This is not the World's Fair, but it is in America. I believe this is Wall Street. Why is it empty? And why are we taking a picture of someone taking a picture? And why is everyone staring at this camera? It's a bit strange. A lot of these old pictures become a bit strange when you analyze them. And take a look at Russia. I believe this is St. Petersburg. Empty. Very odd. Russia, again, seems to be sometime in the 30s or 40s. You can see people walking around in the 30s and 40s. You'll notice that a lot of these pictures pre 1900 seem a bit empty, and there's not as many people, but post 1900, there's a population increase. Iran, this is not the type of architecture you'd expect to see in Iran. The list goes on and on and on. I don't even have to click on some of these pictures. You can see for yourself the style here, and you can see the consistencies. The human brain is designed to recognize patterns, but it seems we've forgotten to do so regarding our architecture. China. Okay, and you've got that exact same archway pattern. The stones are laid in the same way. New Zealand. I'm not sure of the history of New Zealand, but I know Australia started as a prison colony, and this kind of architecture persists there as well. Does it say 1846 down here, 1896? Regardless, this building doesn't look like it fits. Windows looking out at ground level, steps going up. Why would you build some of these buildings just sunk in with the basement peeking out with an opening into it? Singapore. Not at all what you'd expect to see in Singapore, yet it's here. Indonesia. Kenya. What is this doing in Kenya? Egypt. Brazil. Here we go, Australia. The colony of prisoners. We're building these. Uneven ground level. Steps that lead up into the building. The entrance isn't just at ground level for some reason. Canada. Here's a strange old picture. Look at the empty streets. You can see a horse down here, sort of blurred. You see a horse standing still, the cart that the horse is pulling. No one in the streets, no one walking, no one walking into this building. Even the drawing, Toronto, Upper Canada, people are a little sparse. And the Philippines, finally here. I'm just been repeating myself through this segment, but it's necessary because you need to understand the persistence of this kind of architecture around the entire world. And once you start to understand that, everything that is known as common history doesn't make sense anymore. The timelines are off for this. This is what you'd expect in mid 1800s pioneer settlement to look like. If I told you this is what San Francisco looked like in 1850, you would probably believe me. However, that's not the case. Here's a picture of San Francisco in 1877. And this is a panoramic photo. There's different slides of this that I'm going to look at. But just kind of look here. This doesn't look right. You can see even buildings back here that look this level in 1877, and you can see where on them there's nobody here, nobody in the picture, and that's very strange. Another picture, San Francisco, empty streets, completely empty. Very, very strange. But the city is completely built out to a degree that looks modern. And this is actually a part of this panorama. 1877. I'm not sure about you, but that doesn't make sense. The harbor looks dead, empty. You can see ships here, but they'd be blurry or moving for this exposure, but they're just sitting there. And then you look again, empty streets. But this architecture is crazy, and the amount that the city is built out. So, this is San Francisco, and on some old maps, even going back to the 1600s, you will find cities like San Francisco on them. This is explained to us in the mainstream narrative by the early Spaniards landing here and naming it after St. Francis of Assisi. And we're going to take a look at a couple old maps and take a look at some of the cities that are on these old maps. But before we do that, we're going to look at the Wikipedia entry for Tartary, which is something that appears on all of these old maps. No matter which one you look at, look for yourself, Google it yourself, do your own research. But we're going to read here. Tartary became the most common name for Central Asia that had no connection with the real politics or ethnic groups of the region. Until the 19th century, European knowledge of the area remained extremely scarce and fragmentary. In modern English-speaking tradition, the region formerly known as Tartary is called Inner or Central Eurasia. Much of this area consists of arid plains, the main population of which in the past was engaged in animal husbandry. Ignorance surrounding Tartary's use as a place name has spawned fantastic theories, including ideas of a hidden past and mud floods. Such theories assert that Tartary, or Tartaria, was a lost civilization with advanced technology and culture. This ignores the well documented history of Asia, which Tartary refers to. I want you to keep that idea in your mind when we look at these maps. So, first, we are going to look at a map from 1572, Typus Orbis Terrarum. On this map, you can see cities such as Toronto, awfully similar to Toronto, in the same spot it would be, but you can also see Chilaga here, where Chicago would be. It's in fairly large writing, even bigger than Toronto. Wonder what could be there. You will see oceans labeled, the tropics. You will see Africa, completely labeled and mapped out, the Amazons. Markers for cities. Oh, and there it is, Tartaria. Does this look like a map made by people who are ignorant of their surroundings? Mongol. Does this look like a map made by people who simply do not understand what they have experienced? It does not to me. And you'll notice Antarctica is sort of massive here. And Terra Australis, I'm not sure what that part means, but nondum cognita means not yet discovered, not yet known. So the sort of unknown lands. But what's this down here? Terra del Fuego. They've got some parts of it mapped where it connects to South America, and that means land of fire. But this is Antarctica. Were they naming it ironically? Was someone just joking around when they made this? And why is it so big in scale to all of this? You got an above with canals, openings that go through this sort of wall at the top, but none at the bottom. So that's the first map. We're going to go back a little farther to 1450. And this map is something that I think everybody should see, but this is the kind of map that is in the Vatican, and they have plenty of this sort of thing in the Vatican, hidden away in their secret library that no one will ever see. That is not the Pope, for obvious reasons. This is from 1450, when we're told was the Dark Ages. People were kind of primitive, right? Now I'm going to start by telling you the orientation of this map. In the mid right here, you can see the boot of Italy. So it's kind of upside down. You've got Europe over here, Britain, this island, Spain, Africa. It goes up to the bottom of Africa there. This would be all of Russia and Asia. And we're just going to do a little snooping around this map. So where should we start? Let's start near Europe and just sort of work our way around. Anglia, Anglo-Saxons, Anglia, also known as Albion, Albany, of different names, Scotia. We know of Nova Scotia today, but here's just Scotia. And you'll see what looks like a torrent of water around here, or maybe just ocean, with inlets everywhere, flows of water. And this is around where Germany is, Germanicus, Gothia. Maybe this is where we get Gothic architecture from. Prussia, Polana up here, Poland, Russia, Russia. And this is Europa to indicate Europe. But look what we have up here, Tartaria. And there are two excerpts here that I can't read because it's a little low definition and it's in a different language. But these excerpts are some of the largest on this map. And it gets two. So I'm not sure if Tartaria is fake, because this map is not. This map is acknowledged by the Vatican as being real and made by someone. The entire world is covered in beautiful buildings and structures that we're told did not exist. This is the Lord of the Rings world. This is fairy tale land. But here it is, mapped out and drawn for us to see hundreds of years later. Mauritania, Ethiopia Occidental, Ethiopia Austral, Abbasia, or Abyssinia, Abbasia again, up here. This cannot be reconciled with our current view of history. This calls into question everything. And you'll see the Earth drawn as a globe here. You'll see a depiction of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, surrounded by a wall. You'll see this drawing with sort of rings. What's interesting is this. So there's Terra. We assume that's where we are. And in the Bible it says the water is above, aqua, but that's just a myth. I'm not sure if they mean just space or what. But there's Aria, maybe air. Svoko? I think this F is sometimes an S. Luna, Mercury, Venus, Sol, Marte. It seems they have planets here, or realms, I'm not sure. But in 1450, what is all of this? So that's where I'm going to end off this video. I hope you've enjoyed. Um, remember to question everything.